Hey y'all, welcome to the first step and thank you for checking out this new time-lapse video. It's been a long time since I've uploaded an actual tutorial, so now that I have a bit of free time, I thought one was well overdue. Just to catch you up on the past year, I've been super busy working for video game companies on concept art gigs, editing my book, getting ready for conventions, and even starting a new career doing voice acting. But thanks to COVID, a lot of the conventions have either been canceled or moved online, as most of you know, and then some of the freelance jobs have sort of dwindled. All that said, I hope that everyone out there is safe and healthy and being responsible and taking care of each other. It's been a weird year, and it might get weirder before it's done. On to the tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at repurposing an old piece, an old idea that I'd come up with, I think it was last year, and then try to make something new out of it. I use two programs in this. Photoshop is the first one that I start out with, and then I move over to Procreate. So, welcome, check it out. So when I started this, I didn't really have an idea as to what I wanted this witch character to look like. I just knew I wanted to paint a witch, and I just kind of went with it. And you'll notice there's a lot of selecting and cutting and fixing proportions and trying to find the design that works best for it. In the end, I just kind of got bored working on the piece. I thought it was a good start. I'm not going to say it was a great start. It was a good start, but I lost the drive to work on it, which is why I waited a year and then picked it back up this past week. In this first stage, all I'm doing is just exploring using black and white tones, essentially. Just using a basic hard brush to figure out design, and then painting over it, and then, basically messing up the painting until it starts to look right, trying to find shapes that work, and also using reference for that raven, which I'll be using more reference as time goes by. But what kind of came out of it was this super stylized witch character, which is okay. But in the end, I think that might be the reason why I got kind of bored with it, because I'd done a lot of stylized characters, and I kind of wanted to try something new, and I just didn't know what that was. But you'll notice in these steps, I'm also, I'll go over with a fine line to try to find out, or try to pull out details, and then I'll start painting again, and then I'll go over again, and this is just me treading water, like really not wanting to get out of my comfort zone and just sort of wasting time until inspiration strikes. It didn't really strike with this piece. It took a while for me to figure that one I distinctly remember around this point where I was really noodling out some details, thinking, ooh man, I got this. This is going to be great. It just never happened. But like I said, it was a good jumping off point for a later idea. So you'll see that I'm trying to come up with little details that make the character interesting, like putting beads in her hair, and making her facial structure sort of mirror that of the raven, and is trying to find who this character is. And it was an uphill battle. So, but I think the important thing to remember is that when you're starting a character like this, it's not a bad thing to tread water. It just means that the idea hasn't come to fruition yet, and as long as you're still working on it, you know. I don't like to say that I gave up on this piece, because I eventually came back to it, but I did go on a lengthy hiatus until I came back and figured out who the character was. There have been several pieces like that this year that I had dropped in, you know, the past couple of years, or I designed a character, I don't know, like 5 years ago, and then came back to it again a couple of years later, and then I just keep coming back to it because I feel like there's something in that character that, now that I've matured as an artist or I've gained more experience, I'm able to pull out new aspects of that character that I wasn't able to before. So an important lesson: hang on to your artwork, even the stuff you think is garbage, because then you will come back to it. You can come back to it at a later date and really figure out who your characters are and tell their story. Even if you think it's trash, wait a couple years and that trash will turn into something unique and fun. Around this time, I think I remember thinking, "Oh, I got it. This is the character. She's part of this coven who uses ravens as their familiars, and you know they've got all these tribal type piercings and you know different things with their ear decorations and stuff, and yeah, we're coming up onto the point where I just sort of dropped it and then picked it up again a couple days ago in Procreate. But I didn't feel like it was unique enough. It kind of felt dry and boring, and then, like I said, it was too stylized for what I had in my head, and that was me just sort of jumping into a familiar territory, something that was comfortable, something I didn't have to think too much about. But in the end, it really didn't do the piece justice. One thing you may or may not notice is that I try to minimize the amount of layers that I'm working on at a time, or that I have up at a time. If I like an idea and I think it's working, I'll flatten that layer down on top and then start on a new layer, just so I'm not too bogged down with what layer is where and what layer effect I'm using, and it just helps me to stay more organized. It's something I would recommend doing, you know, giving a shot every once in a while to see if that works for you. So now we're in Procreate, and I love Procreate for its portability, and it's got a good array of brushes, and a lot of them feel very traditional. You can see when I start out, I'm not being careful with the original design. I'm painting completely over it without any regard to the line work underneath. I'm just using it as a jumping off point. I often get asked what brushes I use in Procreate, and honestly, I just use one brush primarily, and that is the graphite shading brush. It was a brush that was available in, I think, one of the earlier versions of Procreate, and I just kind of, it drew me in, and I don't really use anything else. I have my Photoshop brushes imported, but more often than not, I'm just using the graphite shading brush, even on tiny details, and it helps to create very traditional looking pieces. Pretty soon I'm going to be throwing a multiply layer over the whole thing, because I wanted to be able to dig out the detail as much as I could from the shadows and really pick and choose what parts of the piece I wanted to highlight. This is also where I started to, the story for this character started to develop, where she belongs to this coven of witches that slowly, after years and years of use of magic, they start themselves to turn into ravens, and then eventually they become the familiars for new witches. And it's like this strange curse, but they become like the most powerful witches, and then they become familiars to help guide new generations. But I really enjoyed that storytelling process, and so I tried to develop the character further, giving her more of a skeletal feel, like she's been at it for a long time, and you can see feathers in her, her scalp is slowly turning into feathers, and then eventually I'll start to pull out those same characteristics in her hands and sort of tie her and the bird together. I noticed that she was also starting to look a little manly, which, isn't a bad thing. She's a very gaunt, much older woman. But I'll do a little bit of a liquefy on her face and sort of bring her chin in a little bit or up a little bit, and sort of squash and pull her features to help give her a little bit more character, so she's not just so dry. Overall, it's a very dark piece, so when I reached a certain point, I actually brought it back into Photoshop to help tweak the levels, and I found that Photoshop has a little bit more control as far as contrast and brightness and all that, controlling those levels is concerned. I love the idea of witches having these runes, runic witchy, symbols carved into their skin, or scarred or seared into their skin. So it started out as kind of a tattoo and then developed into more of a scar a little bit later on. And I felt it was also important to push her silhouette. So that's what I'm trying to do with those feathers, and I'm trying to figure out what areas need the most detail. So I'm getting really fine detail work with the graphite shading brush, and sort of leaving a little bit of those details and shadow vague, so as to push the viewer's attention more into those detailed areas. I'm going to introduce a little splash of color here just to see if it works. It looked okay, but it wasn't what I had originally thought it was going to look like, so I just kind of kept it black and white and decided just to flesh it out as much as I possibly could that way. And right there was where I pushed the chin up, and give her a little bit weaker jaw and a little bit more worn and weathered, like her teeth behind her lips are really nubs at this point. Just wrapping up a few more details in Procreate, then I'll bring it into Photoshop for some final adjustments, and then the piece is done. Do I think it was a perfect piece? No, but I think it was good. Good exploration and good character, storytelling. I'll probably still work a little bit more on it, but in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please hit the subscribe and like button and share it with your friends, and hit me up with any questions or comments you have in the comment section below. That's it for now, guys. Take care of yourselves, stay healthy, and be safe.